By the 9 and 4, welcome to the library, my perceptive patrons, regular visitors, and new guests. I am the recorder, and in this entry we will continue with the second of what will most likely be several more explorations concerning the Age of Valor. This is the age that would see the many attempts of the Daemon Vanson to escape his confinement to once more conquer and rule Jam'mar. It would also see a series of heroes rise to counter these attempts, and their actions, choices, successes, and failures would shape all that has come after. There are many events and points of interest that happen during this age, and I will not have the time to go over each in any sort of fine detail, as this is, as always, just an overview of these events. We will cover the most important events that occur, of course, but even then, some will only get a brief mention. Many of these events will in the future receive their own entries, as interest and time dictate. So, if there is a topic that piques your interest, please make your curiosity known, and I will be sure to see that it is addressed in a future entry. This is, as stated, the second entry of our exploration of the Age of Valor, and if you have not reviewed the previous entry on the subject, I encourage you to do so now, even if I will now give an extremely truncated recounting of the major points of it. In our previous look at the situation in which our tale will soon take place, we covered how the world was mostly a wild and untamed place, how those powers that had managed to endure the reign of the Daemon Vanson had finally begun to reach a point that they could provide basic and comprehensive security to most of the main roads and settlements within the core of their domains, while still having to deal with the many wild and dangerous creatures and beasts, ranging from lowly goblins to the descendants of the elder race of dragons. Whereas the other race of elder status, the Analar, had not been seen in millennia and was thought to be possibly extinct. In our last entry, we also covered how, while still common and ubiquitous, Christech, which was in use around the world of Jam'mar for all time, was commonly misunderstood to just be works of typical magical artifice. The gods themselves were distant and very hands-off, and the free and civil peoples of the realms were loose, if commercially based, in their cooperation. Dragon's Haven served as a central point of resistance to the dark draconic terrors, and was seen as a home to heroes and champions in the fight against the dragons and their servants. A world of adventure, danger, lost history, all awaited the heroes that would rise into it. This is the story of the Age of Valor's early years. Our story begins in earnest in the city of Avlin, the capital of the Elven nation, with a headstrong, talented, nobles bard by the name of Genevieve Nodocare. House Nodocare, or House Moongem, is one of the 10 high houses of the Elven Kingdom, and Genevieve, along with her brother Seven, were the children of the current head of the house. Normally, one of her station would not be expected to head out into the greater world as an adventurer. However, she had left in search of that very brother, who had gone missing earlier on an adventure of his own. Soon, she was joined in her quest by a Dragwa warrior named Blade, and the two of them would spend several years searching Jam'mar for her brother, while exploring ruins and saving villages. Several others would join and part ways with them along the paths of their adventure, and through those years they worked for and with such names of repute as Smoke, as well as the Genovans of Dragon's Haven, over these many adventures. Between slaying dragons, exploring lost ruins, saving villages and hamlets, our heroes also took several breaks to explore various personal goals. For Genevieve, it would have been following up on leads on her brother, and for Blade, he would have to return home often for cultural duties every few years. At times these breaks would last years, but without fail, our heroes would reunite and further their goals together, along those of many allies they had made thus far in their careers. Also of note for these early years would be the group's acquisition of a large stone slab that could produce endless amounts of water. It was an artifact that would prove pivotal to everything that came after. One of a set of 7 created at the very end of the reign. They, together with the 3 artifacts of the heroes, the Sword of Monroe, the Amulet of Camille, and the Hammer of Vapor, served as the seal, the lock, and the keys to the prison that held the demon itself. However, the true nature of the slab and its purpose was still unknown to them for some time, until they came across a second slab later in their adventures. Each of these slabs were tied to an element, and were powered by draining all possible excess energy from the daemon, thus keeping him weak enough to maintain containment. Hidden by powers that would soon become known to our heroes as they continue to discover more of them, and beginning to draw the attention of religious fanatics intent on seizing them for their own aims, Blade, Genevieve, and their allies would take their time and use their personal resources and connections to seek answers in yet another one of their breaks from active adventuring. The difference this time was that when Blade caught back up to Genevieve, it had been over a decade, and not only had Genevieve found a husband, a Masonic warrior of the legendary artificial race known as the Crystons, named Corin Skychild. She had had her first and second children, Damastus and Ashtara Skychild. While young, they had matured to their early teens, and they had been taught and trained by the learned and the skilled, and were eager to join their parents, and had merely been waiting for Uncle Blade to appear so they could do just that. After a few days of catching up, Blade had revealed that he had located another of the slabs. This time, the Slab of Fire, as well as the identity of the cult that was likewise seeking these artifacts. It came as little surprise to any in attendance that this cult were agents of the daemon himself, having lain in secret since the fall of their master, to wait for the chance of his return, and they now sought to secure the artifacts to make that return happen. The Slab of Fire, their next target, was in fact in Blade's homeland of the Isle of Mist. And soon, they were all off to that shrouded and at the time, mostly unknown land. The next few weeks and months would see the collected group make discoveries both great and subtle, and heralded the return of the Analar and their sky cities to bring terror to the peoples of Jam'mar. First of the discoveries was that Blade, who had always been quiet on the matters of past and home, was in fact heir to the throne of the home city, who had set off to learn of the world that his people and nation were so disconnected from. His status allowed them to not only secure passage from the docks, across the mountains and through the mist-cloaked desert mostly uninterrupted and unaccosted, it also granted him the right to bring his guests along with him on his upcoming trial of ascension. This trial required him to venture into the depths of the Undercity and recover knowledge, lore, or technology unknown to the royal throne, who, of course, had the most complete collections of such knowledge in the home city. Of greater import to our heroes, of course, was that according to that very same collection of lore, an object that could only reasonably be the slab of fire was also held somewhere deeper than any had ever managed to reach and return from. The journey down into the depths of the Undercity was a lengthy affair of battles, pathfinding, and trying to unravel the mysteries that this place held. When they finally reached the 9th level, what had assumed to be the bottom level of the Undercity for thousands of years at this point, they discovered a room that no man or woman, mortal or elder, had seen or entered in at least as long. It was a vast temple or cathedral, with 2 large statues standing so tall the upper thirds of their forms could not be made out clearly. One was of a dragon, the other an Analar, both bearing 9 wings. While understanding only barely the enormity of this discovery, as this room was the only place that had proven safe from both the random conjurations of foe, obstacles, and traps, as well as those beasts or other things that would roam the halls. None of them would even touch the doorway into this place, nor look its way if the door was open. Of course, we now know that this was the first time a mortal had been allowed to enter one of these rare yet hallowed places. A shrine to the 9 Wings, creator of all. Mortals at this time, and for all recorded history prior, had been kept unaware of the truth of the 9 Wings, and only the elder races were allowed to know of or worship him. Thanks to the safety provided by this hallowed place, our heroes were able to rest and prepare before setting off into the deeper levels, as the passage down had made itself present, another first, as none had been aware of any depth beyond the 9th level. Battling and exploring their way down took days and nearly cost the life of several members of the group several times, with multiple close calls for each, including the young Mastis and his sister Ashtara. At the end, however, on level 15, they faced, perhaps for the first time in living memory, one of the firsts of dragon kind, and they were completely unaware of this fact for quite some time. This dragon was one of 4 that served as guardians and wardens for the man held beyond the 4 halls they'd each claimed as theirs. Each had chosen to be a representative of a basic element: fire, air, water, or earth. And after some words and testing of wills and purpose, our heroes were allowed to pass into the inner sanctum. What they had found inside was, to say the least, not what they were expecting. A lich, tall, and still possessing the winged bones of his former Analar form, which greeted them warmly and welcomed them into his home and workshop. This was the Analar First, Jackson. Although this last point would go unremarked for many, many years from this period, as Jackson never leaves his workshop, and thus rarely garners much attention to himself. Just the way he likes it. Jackson had been in the depths of the Undercity for ages, and was serving as the keeper of an artifact left to him by management. This artifact, of course, was the Slab of Fire, currently being used as an alternative source of power for the city. One that was actually far less efficient and powerful than the true system built for the island. He was also the creator of Crystons, and thus why Corrin, as one of his creation, had needed to be present for them to have discovered the ways into the deeper levels of the Undercity, and eventually to where they were at now. Now, it is unclear if our heroes breaking the seal that had kept the lower levels unknown and hidden was responsible for what happened next, or if it was just a coincidence of timing, or the actions of someone unknown. But as our heroes and Jackson were meeting and discussing events and truths, for the first time since the horrible days of the Reign, an Analar Sky City appeared in the air above the Isle of Mist, and worse, began to immediately attack the home city. The attack came from nowhere, and while the Dragwa are no slouches in the matter of combat, much less on their own turf, they struggled to even hold off the forces beginning to besiege their home. Fighting on the front lines of this attack were the newest, disposable, mass-produced warrior that these fallen and corrupted Analar thralls of Vanson had created, known as the Kytogen. These living weapons were limited in their lifespan, generally and often counted only in hours or maybe days at best. They were soulless, ruthless, and mindlessly obedient to their master's wishes and commands. They were also able to be possessed of any number of varying powers and abilities, programmed and armed for their tasks at the time of their spawning. The turning point and salvation of the home city in this dark hour came as the heroes had retrieved the Slab of Fire, which reverted the city to its original and far more powerful generator systems. And with the recognized heir of the throne of the home city present to aid in doing so, Jackson was able to bring online, for the first time since before the 36 seconds, the full defensive and weapon systems of the home city. Please remember that the home city was specifically designed with sky-born foes in mind, and sported some of the most advanced weaponry and other systems ever designed and built by the Analar. By the time our heroes had made it back up to the castle via a lift directly from Jackson's workshop, the Sky City had been torn from the sky, burning and falling into bits, burning all over the city and the sands outside. The Kytogen went mad and began inflicting great local damage when their controlling animus was severed such, each having to be taken down by many warriors. The home city, itself being largely crafted from the nigh unbreakable material star metal, was still nonetheless covered in burning debris and had dozens of teams running around to contain and repair the devastation from the battle. Bodies would need collecting and buried, and the wounded would need tending. But the first appearance of the Analar had been as aggressors, and worse, servants of the Daemon. This news sent chills and shocks across the world. And it is on this victorious yet ominous point we shall put a pin in our story for this entry. The world was now aware that great and terrible things were in motion, and threats of ancient danger once forgotten were once more on the rise. How our heroes would pursue their goals will be revealed in our next entry on the Age of Valor. For now, my perceptive patrons, regular visitors, and new guests, I want to thank you for your time and your continued interest in our exploration of the realms of Jam'mar. Until you make your way back to the library for your next entry, I have always been the recorder, and by the 9 and 4, be well, take care of yourselves and each other. If you'd like to contribute to the further exploration and explanation of the realms, please consider leaving a comment, a like, and sharing the video around. I read all the comments and make efforts to reply to each. Thank you for helping to grow the channel, and know I look forward to each and every one of your comments. Other methods of support can be found in the channel's description. Thank you for watching.